There's a Calvinist named James White, and he's become popular now among Calvinists. Brags about debating over 100 debates and done so many debates, so he thinks he's all smart. So a lot of Calvinists turn to him for his arguments. One of his arguments is the argument of compatibilism. The doctrine of, he calls it compatibilism. What does that mean? Well, here's the thing. As you know about Calvinism, they teach that you do not have free will. That it's all under the control of God. God has to control everything. But here's the thing. What we Christians argue then is this. If God is in control of everything in this world, it's not by man by his own free will, then when a person lies, steals, commits sodomy, incest, and rape, if that's not from his free will, that's God's will? God allowed that to happen? God had the people murdered and killed and all that? That was God's will to do all that? You see that? So that's what we argue against Calvinists. See, we argue against Calvinists that you have to say man has free will. You know why? Because the sin you commit and I commit is from our own free will, our own fault. When I commit murder, that's my fault. I can't just blame it on God and say, oh, God made me do this. But James White, he tries to argue this way, and he calls it compatibilism to get away with it. He says, well, here's the thing, okay? Yeah, I know everything is under control by God, but he was not the actual person doing the murder. You're the actual person doing the murder. And that's what we call compatibilism. God, he uses that bad thing, that murder, for good. So we see mankind does the actual sin himself, but God has a control over that and uses it for good, and which is what we call compatibilism. And then he shows several verses. Go to Genesis 50. Genesis chapter 50. Genesis chapter 50. Notice right here that when Joseph's brother sold Joseph to slavery, it was not his brother's fault. It was God's fault that made that happen. So that's what James White argues. Go to James chapter 50. We'll look at verse 20. James chapter 50, we'll look at verse 20. Notice right here, but as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring it to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. You see that? The wonderful doctrine of compatibilism. Mankind does the actual sin, but it's still under control by God because he uses it for a good purpose. Look at Isaiah 10. Isaiah 10. Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah chapter 10. Isaiah chapter 10. We will look at verse 5. Isaiah chapter 10, and we will look at verse 5. Alright, notice here's another example of mankind doing the actual sin, but God's using it, he's still in control and using it for good. So see, it's compatible with each other. Thus compatibilism. Isaiah chapter 10 verse 5. O Assyrian, the rod of mine anger, and the staff in their hand is mine indignation. See, under control by God. I will send him against an hypocritical nation, and against the people of my wrath will I give him a charge to take the spoil and to take the prey, and to tread them down like the mire of the streets. Howbeit he meaneth not so, neither doth his heart think so, but it is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations not a few. For he saith, are not my princes altogether kings? Is not Calno as Carchemish? Is not Hamath as Arpad? Is not Samaria as Damascus? As my hand hath found the kingdoms of the idols, and whose graven images did excel them of Jerusalem and of Samaria, shall I not, as I have done unto Samaria and her idols, so to Jerusalem and her idols? Verse 13, notice, by the strength of my hand I have done it. Verse 14, and my hand hath found as a nest the riches of the people. Verse 15, shall the axe boast itself against him that heweth therewith, or shall the saw magnify itself against him that shaketh it? See, it's all under control by God. See, it's not the free will of man. Verse 16, therefore shall the Lord of hosts, send among his fat ones leanness. Under his glory he shall kindle a burning like the burning of fire. Verse 17, and the light of Israel shall be for a fire. Okay, so notice right here, see, all that this pagan king does in slaughtering children, killing, murdering people, this bloody violence, it's all under God's hand. See? So that's how James White argues with this doctrine of compatibilism. But here's the answer, okay? We do agree with him that God, that all things work together for good, that he can use anything, even the bad, for good. But this is what we disagree with. We disagree that God was the one who caused those people, had his will, and made those people sin. All right, that's what we disagree with. We believe that mankind, out of his own free will, he did the sin, and God, by his own great and love and mercy, he just uses the bad that Christians do for good. See, that's a great God we serve, actually. Now, look at 2 Samuel 11. 2 Samuel 11. 2 Samuel 11. See, Calvinists, they make a big deal about God decreeing. The decree of God. The decree of God. God decreed it to happen. Alright? So God decreed that Assyrian to sin. God decreed Joseph's brothers to sin. So God's involved. It's not the free will of man. God decreed it. But he's not responsible for the sin. He's not responsible for those people being slaughtered, those innocent children being killed. And he's not the one. You know why? Because he's not the one actually doing the sin. All he did was decree it to happen, and mankind was the one who did the sin himself. Do you know what that is? You got to realize this, all right? If God decreed a man to sin, you got to realize this: God sinned too.
Yeah, man.
No. You want me to give you an example? David decreed Uriah to be killed. Oh, he didn't kill Uriah. He didn't kill Uriah. It was the lost people that killed him. But he decreed it. And God gave him the responsibility. He said, you sinned. Go to 2 Samuel 11, verse 14. And it came to pass in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, set ye Uriah in the forefront of the hottest battle, and retire ye from him, that he may be smitten and die. See, he decreed it to happen. Now, what did God say? Oh, you know, David, that's not your fault. Look at chapter 12, verse 9. Chapter 12, verse 9. You know what God said? Wherefore hast thou despised the commandment of the Lord to do evil in his sight? Thou hast killed Uriah the Hittite with the sword. David killed him with the sword. Even though he didn't actually do it, he just decreed it. What are you going to do about that, Mr. Calvinist? God just decreed it. He wasn't the one actually doing it. He still sinned. God sinned. You accuse God for sinning. What? Oh, don't get mad at me. Don't say, oh, that's just your reason and logic. No, no, no. Bible. Bible. Look at your Bible. All right, now this is the most stupid argument I heard. Go to James 1. James 1. But let me give this argument. Go to James 1. The most stupid argument I heard is this. They say, you know, okay, but you got to realize this. Because of the logic of secondary causes, God is not the one doing the sin. Now, what does that mean? What that means is it, okay? Okay. Who is the one who actually did the sin? See? Not God, who is the first cause, who decreed it to happen. Yeah. The second cause is man. Man is the one who actually did the sin. So don't blame it on God, because second cause, first cause, they don't go together. The second cause did the sin, not the first cause. See? First cause, God. He decreed it to happen. But he wasn't the one doing the actual sin. The second cause, man did it. See? Man did it. God decreed it, first cause. Second cause, man did the murder. So who is the one that did the murder? Who's the one that did the sin? Man or God? No, not God, because he's first cause all the way here. Second cause, man did it. See, so that's his argument. But that's a stupid argument, okay? Go to James 1, verse 13. James 1, verse 13. This fancy philosophical wordplay that you might say, oh, it's mind games, how do I do that? Look, okay, look, okay? It still doesn't change the fact, okay, that God caused the sin to take place, since he is the first cause. You know what the Bible says? Man, who is supposedly the secondary cause, cannot blame it on God as the first cause, because the first cause is from man himself, not God. Go to James 1, verse 13. James 1, verse 13. Let no man say when he is tempted, I am tempted with God. He's the first cause of evil. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither tempteth he any man. Verse 14. But every man is tempted when he is drawn of his own lust and enticed. See? He's the cause. Man's the cause. First, second, third, fourth, fifth, 27th cause, whatever. Don't blame it on God. He's not the first cause at all. Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin, when it is finished, bringeth forth death. See, the Bible showed you God's not the first cause at all. So this stupid philosophical argument, well, you know, God's the first cause and man's the second cause, and man as the second cause was the one actually doing the sin, not God the first cause. That whole fancy philosophical wordplay completely falls apart when James 1:13-15 says, God ain't even the first cause. So there you go. And here's another thing, okay? You got to understand this. In the court of law, you know who's the one that takes more blame for the murder, for the sin? The first cause, not the second cause. Let me give an example, okay? The instigator and author of the murder plot is going to take more, the first cause, is going to take more blame than the one who listened to the instigator and actually did the murder, the second cause. See, who's going to get more blame and hurt in court? The assassin, or the assassin who was told to do it, instructed to do it by this mafia boss? Who's going to get the heavier at court? See, the mafia boss. Because he's the first cause. He instigated it. He authored it. In a court of law, the blame of murder does not go to the assassin who actually did it. He has to have blame. But the heavier blame goes to the first cause.
That's a fact.
They don't think. These Calvinists don't use their brains. Well, because God's the first cause and not the second cause who actually does the sin, with the doctrine of compatibilism, we can't say God actually did the sin. No, you know what we have to say? God not only does the sin, He gets more blame for the sin.
That's right.
According to the court of law, too.
That's right.
He is more responsible, gets more blame for that.
That's crazy, man.
My friend, don't blame God when you're going through sufferings right now and when you suffering the consequences of sin in this world. It's all from man. It's all from man. You made the free choice. I'm sorry. Now we have to put up with it. You better thank God that He quoted Romans 8:28 saying, He could have left you as it is and say, well, the bad messed up, you messed up, and you know, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Thank God that He says, despite of your free will committing the sin and you have to put up with the consequences, I will still show you mercy by somehow using that for good. You better thank God for that.
Yeah.
See, this is a problem with Calvinists.